Okay, well, it's the penultimate in conservation with, and me and my friend Taka are so excited today because we have a man who I've been chasing for some time. I tend to chase men quite a lot, actually. I've been chasing Paul McGuinness, who's the editor of BBC Wildlife magazine for a while, to come on and talk about the whole mystery of putting magazines together. I mean, it's something that I find fascinating, even though I come from a magazine background myself. Many of you may not know that. But before I tell you all about that, let me just quickly say that I'm David Lindo, also known as the Urban Birder. This is the penultimate episode of the current series of In Conservation With. I'm with tonight talking with Paul McGuinness, who's the editor of BBC Wildlife magazine, as I said earlier. And tonight is also sponsored by Leica Sport Optics. So thank you very much for that. Now, going back to the subject of magazines, my background is actually my main background is in publishing. I used to work for a series of magazines and newspapers, ranging from the Sunday Times through to working on Birdwatch magazine even. So I've worked on a lot of different magazines and also fashion magazines and all sorts of stuff. And I was predominantly selling advertising space, but I was also towards the end of my career in that world working on advertorials, which I'm sure Paul will tell us about in terms of what that means. Sponsorship. I love concepts, actually. I love selling concepts. And I was saying to Paul just outside of recording this that experience I had on magazines actually was one of the biggest, if not the biggest single factor in helping me create the Urban Birdo as a brand and actually do what I'm doing today. It's been an amazing curve, actually. I didn't realize I'd be using that sort of knowledge I learned then, but here I am, and that's what's happened. So, Paul, without any further ado, how are you and where in the world are you?
Hello, I'm fine. Thank you very much for asking. I've just got home from work, watched a little bit of the football, and then logged on to here. And I am in a place called Bitton, which is about halfway between Bristol and Bath in the southwest of England, just on the very top tip of Somerset. And it's very lovely, very nice and peaceful. We moved here about a year ago, and it's lovely. There's a little nature reserve, about 3 minutes walk down the road. At the back of the house, just loads of trees and fields and things. So it's very nice, thank you.
Now, did you say Bitten?
Bitton, Bitton.
Oh, okay, because I was just about to say Bitten. Oh, that's interesting. It's like a little bit of a birdie name, but obviously not.
Oh no, not Bitton. No. Although maybe if I said it in a local accent, it would be a lot closer to that.
Where were you from originally?
So I grew up in North Devon, which is lovely to see that you've got my old friend Tarka there, because of course Tarka the otter is the most famous character from where I grew up. When the River Tor ran through the town where I grew up at Barnstable.
Well, that's good. By the way, I must apologise if you're hearing kids and stuff in the background. I'm in Spain. I've got the window open. It's just been raining, and I think there's some kids playing outside. And I think it's nice to have a bit of ambient kid sound, isn't it? Really.
It is, yeah. I mean, my son is going to bed at the moment, so I can't guarantee we won't hear any sound from there either.
Okay. Well, as I said earlier, I've been sort of chasing you for a long time to come on in conservation with, and I'm really happy. And thank you very much for coming along. And I'm really, really interested in knowing about the BBC Wildlife magazine in terms of its history, but also how the magazine's put together. Because people receive magazines and we often take them for granted. We just oh, it's thick, full of ads or what have you. People don't understand maybe sometimes why things are the way they are sometimes. So I just wondered if you can kind of give us a blow by blow account of, you walk into the office on Monday to plan the next issue kind of thing. So how does that work? Let's just get straight into it.
Right. Well, that's a big question. I mean, we start on a Monday morning. The editorial team, which there's sort of around 9 of us, it sort of fluctuates a bit, but there's around 9 of us on the staff on the editorial team. And so that's people who do jobs like sub-editing copy, picture researching, design, writing, interviews, and that kind of thing. And we all get together ordinarily. I mean, at the moment we're doing everything remotely, but ordinarily we all get together in a big meeting room every Monday morning, and we look at what we call the flat plan. So for those who don't know, the flat plan, which every time I say it, I always have the theme from Batman in my head. Whenever you make a magazine or any kind of publication, you have a flat plan, which is literally just, I should have printed one out, but we do it all digitally, but it's literally just a little thumbnail sequence for every page in the magazine. So we have, say 116 little thumbnails in a row, and on each one we write what goes on it. So we start with cover, and then we have an ad on the inside cover, and then the welcome letter, the content, and so on and so forth. So on a Monday morning, we sit there, and the production editor, who is the person who basically makes sure everything happens, she tells everybody what to do and when. She makes sure that we hit all of our deadlines, that everything is as it should be. She goes through page by page, says, right, okay, cover, where are we at with the cover? So Rich, our art editor, will hopefully pull out some bits of paper at this point, or turn his screen and say, okay, so these are the options we're looking at for the cover. And we'll go through that page by page, and there'll be, all sorts of complications along the way. We'll talk about a particular feature, and it'll be like, okay, we're missing this photo. We're trying to track down the photographer. He's somewhere in Borneo, but he hasn't had any internet connection for the last 3 days. We've got 4 days until we go to print. So if we don't hear from him, what is our backup plan going to be? And we work out all those kinds of problems. And everybody has their tasks, and away we go. And we do that every Monday morning. But in order to get to that stage, we've had to plan the whole thing. So you just go back and back and back. I mean, to give you an idea, we're talking here in the middle of June. We've just sent our July issue to print yesterday. So that will be on the newsstand and delivered to subscribers in 2 weeks' time. That's how long it takes for it to go from once we've sent it to be in your hands. So in the meantime, we're now working on the August issue. So we've started on the August issue earlier this week. We have 4 weeks before that goes to print. We're on a 4-week cycle. But I'm working because the editor's job, or part of the editor's job, is to plan in advance and to work out what we're doing strategically and what's happening well in advance. So I'm currently looking at what we're going to do in October, November and December. And I've even started a little bit on January 2020, looking at what's coming up, because it takes a long time to commission a feature. Let me think of an example. What were we talking about today? I can't think of any examples of what we're talking about today. Regardless, it'll come to me in a minute. But we'll think about what we're going to do, a feature to tie in with such and such a program on the BBC or on one of the other channels, or there's an interesting topic that we think needs to be covered. There's whatever the hot topics are, the big debates. So we're sort of like planning quite far in advance. And I'm thinking, okay, so in November we're going to do this feature. That's an example. We were talking today about maybe doing a feature in October, November time about how to feed birds in your garden over the winter, best practice. There's some new science that's being done. Somebody's been doing some research into the optimum colors for feeders and the optimum distances of this, that, and the other, which we were talking about. So we'll sit there now talking about what's going to happen in the October, November issue. And we'll say, I would find really interesting is to have a look and see, what other research has been done. So is this new research knock the old research into a cocked hat, or and somebody else said I think we should do something about cleaning bird feeders, because people always forget to clean the bird feeders. And so we'll come up with ideas, all sorts of different ideas. Are we limiting this to the UK? Are we, do we want to look at how people operate in different countries? There was an email that we had from a reader about, I think somewhere like Malaysia or Indonesia, saying that they've just been reported, their neighbours have just reported them to the authorities for feeding birds on their balcony, because that's now illegal there. So we're thinking, okay, so how do people feed wildlife? So we have all these things. We sit there for ages and ages bashing all this out, and eventually we'll decide, okay, this is what we want to do. Let's go and find someone to write the piece. So then we think, okay, here's a person that would be a really good person. We go and discuss it with them. They pitch in ideas. So all of this takes a long time. You commission it. You say, okay, I want this many words by that period, by that deadline, and away they go. You have to give them time to do that. Normally you expect, we want to give a writer, maybe 3, 4, 5 weeks to turn a feature around, more if it's, if it involves a lot more interviews, or less if it's kind of, their field of specialism. So that's kind of a little bit of insight into how that works. But how we actually come up with what goes into each issue is we're sort of looking at things, and this, we don't always get it right. I'm well aware of that. But what we're trying to do in each issue is to give a real balance of content to suit the interests of all of our readers, because we have such a variety of readers. I've worked on magazines where your reader, you can kind of almost get a picture of them. What do they look like? Where do they shop? What sort of car do they have? But with BBC Wildlife, that's impossible, because it's anybody who's interested in life on Earth, which can be, children right through your entire life. It can be people of all social backgrounds, every conceivable type of person. So it's quite tricky to, deliver for everyone. So what we try and do is we think, okay, so some people are coming here for science. Some people are coming here for tips of how to get closer to wildlife, or to understand the wildlife that they're seeing better. Some people are coming here for the amazing photography. Some people are coming for conservation news. Some people want just us to sort of be informed about the latest debate, and so on. So we've got to try and get all of those different elements into the magazine. We've also got people, a lot of our readers really, really want UK wildlife. That's what they want in the magazine. It's roughly the same amount of our readers really, really want global wildlife. So you've kind of got that kind of measure to get as well. So we've got to make sure we've got enough UK wildlife, because we are a UK magazine, but we've also got to make sure we're reporting from around the world. And when we do that, we then have to think, well, have we got enough of a balance across? We had an email from somebody just this morning saying, I've noticed the last couple of issues, you've had lots of African wildlife and nothing from South America. Well, that's fair comment. Fortunately, we've got a bunch of great South American content coming up, which will keep you happy, but we need to make sure we've got that kind of balance. And then on top of that, we've got to make sure that we've got diversity of species. So we've got plants, we've got fungi, we've got all the animals. So to make sure you cover all of that, and then you also have to make sure that you're covering, delivering content that appeals to people who've got different accessibility, by which I mean we have scientists, some of the leading experts in their field in the country buy our magazine, and children read it. And so you have to be able to deliver to all of those people. So it's a real juggling act. So if you can imagine, when we're trying to put the issue together and decide in terms of putting the flat plan together, deciding what are we going to put in this issue, there's an awful lot of boxes to tick. So we sit there having all sorts of look at it, and sometimes you can get through to like a week before you're going to print, and someone will say, "Has anyone noticed we got dolphins and we got seals in this issue?" And you think, "Oh dear, no, is that a problem?" And you have a look at it, and sometimes you think, "Okay, well, let's pull one of those out, put it in next month. We've got this next month that we're coming back in. So you sort of move in blocks around. I was going to say I could go on about this all night. Part of me feels like I already have.
No, I mean, I think it's important to allow people to speak, and I think with Zoom it's difficult to talk over each other as well, isn't it? Because it gets all weird.
It is.
So, but anyway, it's good to listen, and plus you're here for us to listen to and to converse with. I just want to rewind a bit in terms of deciding what goes into an issue. How does it work? Do you get people sending you research all the time, or is it something that, you know, people within your office or associated with the magazine are always radar on, looking out for any kind of interesting things that could be made into an article?
It's a bit of both, really. We get an awful lot of pitches. We get writers pitch to us. I don't know, I probably get 10 to 15 writers pitch a feature to me every day. And there are some of my other colleagues who get ones in addition to that. And on top of that, we probably get, I don't know, 40 or 50 pieces of research sent to us every day. Press releases from universities all over the world, from zoological societies, from charities and so on. So we read it all. We don't always get the opportunity to reply to it all, although we do try. That's been really difficult over the last 18 months working remotely. To try and find time to also deal with correspondence has been really difficult. So if you've pitched anything to us over the last 18 months and I haven't replied, sorry. We do try. But then we also have, the other side of that is that we have our antennae out, as you said. What were we talking about earlier? I can't think, my mind's gone a blank, but we had a future features meeting today, and there were lots of sort of things in there where people said, we've got a list, maybe we've sort of whittled it down to, we do one of these every week. We whittled it down to say 10 features that we thought maybe had legs or wings or, whatever else. And probably 6 or 7 of those would be from external writers, and the remaining sort of 3 or 4 would be ideas that we'd had internally that we thought, we need to cover this. I mean, an example today is we were talking about, the climate conference in Glasgow in November. We're talking about, okay, so how are we going to cover that? What are we going to do that will tie in with that? And then we've had pitches, from every corner of the globe to look at. A lot of things that we've looked at that we've thought, well, we've kind of covered this recently. So maybe, maybe now is not the time for this. But it's, it's a variety, but it's a filter. And when I talk to people about what an editor is, I think a lot of people have the idea of an editor as somebody who sort of edits copy, that someone sends in words and the editor sort of cuts it back to the amount of words that they need and out it goes.
Because that was the question I was going to ask, actually. I was going to ask you, exactly what you just said, what is an editor's job? Because as you say, people do think editor, I send them a load of words and they just knock it together and then that's great.
And that's not really it. I mean, there is an element of that, but that's not really it. What an editor does, I think anyway, is they edit the world. So within a specialist interest magazine, so the same, I work for Immediate Media. We publish BBC Wildlife. We also publish BBC History magazine, Good Food, Top Gear, the Radio Times, so on and so forth. So what we do is we take the world, so I take the world of wildlife, the natural history world, and I'm editing what happens in that world on a monthly basis or 4-weekly basis to send out to readers so that they're kept abreast of the important developments, they're kept abreast of the latest issues. Now that I come from a magazine background, I'm not a biologist or a zoologist or a natural historian. I'm someone with a passion for the natural world, but I come from a magazine background. Previously, I was the editor of BBC History Revealed magazine, where I was looking at everything that was happening in the history world. And, so that was a lot about anniversaries and how history affects the modern day. So if I was on the history magazine, I might be looking at doing something around the Israel-Palestine conflict, for example, because that's a big story in the news today. And so you can, but with wildlife, I'm editing that world. So I'm looking at all the interesting bits of research that get sent in to us, all these stories that people send in saying, this is what, this is this amazing thing we're doing with human-elephant conflict in Equatorial Guinea. We look at that and we think, well, that's really interesting. We just also had a feature about human-elephant conflict in Botswana sent in to us. So human-elephant conflict feels like quite a major issue at the moment. So we've been talking about that. So that's the basic idea. So we're editing the world. I don't know if I've sort of waffled a bit around that subject, but does that make sense? We're just sort of editing what happens all around the world. All right, we're supposed to know about everything that there is to know about this, and here's the things that you really need to know. That's the basic idea.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, it's interesting also that you and I kind of come from a similar background. In fact, I'm not a conservationist. I didn't study at university and get a knowledge of any sort. I came from a commercial background, which I think has been a benefit for me because it gives you a bit of an edge in terms of thinking about how people react to certain things and how you can get people to react to certain things. So do you think your background then is a benefit compared to someone who, may have come from a more academic background in terms of natural history and has now become the editor because they know a load about wildlife?
I think for me personally, and the way I work, I think it's a great benefit to me, because I've always just been fascinated by everything. Anything I see, I want to know how it works. Music is a great passion, so I want to learn to play instruments in order to learn how music worked. Science, I'm really interested in science, and because I just want to know how the universe fits together. And so that makes me, I'm a very curious person. And so that makes me want to go and find out the answers. And it raises the questions that a lot of readers will have. The readers will want to know what is going on with human-elephant conflict in Africa. Just the same way that I'm asking that question. And this, I always say this with my staff in my teams, is that, don't ever assume when we're putting something together that, oh, well, I didn't really follow that bit, but I'm sure everybody else does. Because if I don't understand it or you don't understand it, then there's going to be plenty of other people. So it's that kind of questioning that works for me, which isn't to say that I think that all the best editors are, come from the same background as me. Colleagues on the history magazines who are historians, and that puts them in a great position to do what they do, which is, fabulous work. But I think there's room for both, but I'm glad I came at it my way.
What are the qualities to be an editor? So, I'm at school, I'm thinking I want to be an editor. I mean, to be honest, I wouldn't even have thought of being an editor because it's not one of those things that comes up. You just think, I want to write or what have you. What are the qualities of an editor, and how is it advertised, or how do young people kind of know about this particular thing existing?
I have no idea. I never wanted to be an editor. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, David. Although the only thing that when I was a kid and people used to say, what do you want to be when you grow up? I knew it would either be something to do with music or something to do with animals. And so, I'm pleased that I am at least doing one of those things at the moment.
So I've just interrupted, by the way, music. Now, talk to me about that for a second. What kind of music and what kind of instruments are you talking about?
I play lots of instruments very badly. Or I play guitar. The electric bass is my favorite instrument. That's the one I generally play when I play in bands. I've played in bands since I was a teenager, and still play in bands now. It's been great. It's given me the opportunity to tour around this country and a few other countries. Not a lot, but a little bit. I've been on a couple of records that nobody's ever heard of. the best thing about it is that I've met lots of brilliant people and just had so many wonderful times. You know, so many of my friends, musicians, have come through that. I play the piano, keyboards, and I've got a room upstairs with loads of like little bits and pieces that you can make music with.
You sound like a prince in the making. What genre?
Oh, right across the board. I love lots of old American music, sort of blues, country, gospel, soul. I love reggae. I love Latin music. I love lots of sort of very traditional, you know, very sort of mainstream pop music. The Beatles are a huge passion. I absolutely love the Beatles, and all of the sort of, you know, the big groups in the 60s and 70s. Lots of weird stuff, lots of sort of noise, lots of things that might make you think that the stereo's broken. Right across the spectrum. I've never, the only type of music I've never played, it would be within the classical field, but I enjoy listening to classical music.
Yeah.
Or jazz. I've no idea what's going on with jazz. I love not knowing what's going on with jazz. Stick on a Charles Mingus LP and it's just like, I've no idea what's going on, but it sounds great.
Yeah, it does. Well, you got obviously a very eclectic taste in music, which reflects what you say in terms of your eclectic mind when it comes to trying to collect information all over the place about a particular subject. So going back to what editors are about, okay, so it's not something that's advertised as a job for kids, but what do you need to be an editor? Do you need to be proficient at English? You know, what do you need? Could I be an editor tomorrow?
You couldn't be one tomorrow, but you could be one. The main thing I think you need to be an editor is experience. You need to have done lots of other jobs within that field. You know, it's like any trade. I'm old enough that I sort of didn't need to have degrees and before I could get into publishing. I just sort of managed to get a job and worked my way up. I just, I had a really basic job in a book publishers in Oxfordshire, where I was basically taken on for a fortnight because they needed somebody to come in and try and break something. So they needed somebody who had no talent whatsoever, and if the product worked for them, then it probably worked. So I came in and I got into the office and I thought, God, this is nice, because I'd like labored on building sites and all sorts. I thought, this is nice, and I could do this. And so when I was in the office, I heard them saying, "Oh, we need somebody to come in and sort all of this stuff out." Literally a mountain of pictures that needed to be sorted and filed in library. So I said, I could do that. I could do that. So I ended up, I started off there. I had a 2-week contract I was brought in for 2 weeks, and I was there for 2 years. And in that time, I just basically asked everybody how you did everything. How do you do that? How do you put that together? How do you make this? Because it just seemed like such a lovely thing. And, as someone who loves and has always loved magazines and books and, any kind of information and media, I've always, been fascinated by it and consumed it massively. And so then I moved to London. I got a job working at the University of Westminster, helping the students on their media course make magazines, make their student union magazine. And I sort of, I kind of blagged my way onto that. I said, "Do you know how to do this?" "Oh, yeah. Thinking, well, I can probably work it out anyway. And I did work it out. And so I gradually did more and more different jobs within publishing, from essentially sweeping the floor to, doing writing, doing editing, doing research. And I've worked across lots of different titles, lots of different brands for more than 20 years. And in that time, I've just sort of looked at what the opportunities are and how can I develop, because I'm not somebody who can just do the same thing every day. Some people love that. They love to come in and know that this is what I'm going to do, and then when I've done that, then that's the end of my day. I can't do that. I want to come in every morning and go, right, what should I do? what needs to be done, what's interesting. And it's that kind of curiosity. I don't think I know a single editor who wanted to be an editor. And I know quite a lot of editors. We all just ended up doing it because we enjoyed doing all the other tasks, all the other bits. There's kind of a ladder really that sort of starts with an editorial assistant, and then you might progress onto a staff writer. Then you might, you might become a production editor, or a sub-editor first, and then a production editor. Then you might become a section editor, then a features editor, then a deputy editor, and then an editor. I've no idea what happens after that. I'm in no rush to find out. But that's kind of the progression, really. So you just come in at the bottom and work out how it all works. And if you like doing it, then you'll carry on going up to the point that you like to do. You know, there are loads. Some of the best production editors I know have been a production editor for 20 odd years, and they're brilliant at it and they love it. And because it's a great job, fascinating job, it's a really interesting job. Probably the one I enjoyed most actually on my way up. On my way back down, I may see if I can stop there. But yeah, there isn't really an answer to your question. I think, David, is the answer. I've no idea how you do it.
No, it's interesting because some of the best people I've met in terms of their trades came into it completely by accident. I know a guy who's a director. He directs music videos and feature films. And he told me, he's an English guy, he told me that his first break was he was a runner on a shoot for a band, and the director never turned up, or I don't know, it was a new band. I think they were called The Cure. It's either The Cure or The Jam. And someone said, who's going to do this? And he said, I can do it. So he directed this commercial, this music video without knowing anything about directing. Next thing, he's doing Michael Jackson videos. You know, he did the famous Aha Take On Me video in the 80s.
Oh yeah, with the drawing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so he went on and done loads of stuff, and it's amazing because that's one thing I think is really interesting, especially for younger people, to understand that, you know, you can do whatever you want to do in life, and it's not a question of, you know, it's on a plate or there's a job with all the sort of description of what you need to do. You know, I tell kids, for example, in terms of what I do, because a lot of people think, oh man, you got like a dream job. And I say, yeah, it is a dream job, a dream that I never dreamt of, it just happened. But it's a job that I made myself. All the elements of it, I invented. So as you say, you come in the morning and you say, what am I doing today? You are actually driving your career, really, I suppose. And as an editor, you are also a manager of people, aren't you?
Yeah, which is,
it's more than just literature. It's actually managing people as well.
Yeah, my job's mostly about people, really. My job is just, I spend most of my day just talking. I mean, a lot of what my job is answering questions. You know, so someone within my team will come to me and say, you know, we've got this, what do you reckon, that or that? And we can sort of then talk through the responses, or I might have that conversation with someone in marketing or in production or in advertising sales. You know, there's loads and loads and loads of other people that are involved in the business other than the editorial team. But I agree completely. You can just do anything you want in life if you just put your hand up or just put yourself forward for it. I think taking opportunities is the biggest bit of advice I would give anyone sort of starting out on a career or looking to change a career. It's all about looking, where is the opportunity here? How can I take the opportunity? You know, do things that you find interesting, that you want to do. I think it's much harder for younger people today, David. These younger people, not like us, you know, they their education that they go through is much more structured. I think everybody who is going to work in the media really is going to have a degree in a relevant subject, quite possibly, you know, more than one degree. You know, might do a master's. They're going to have to be able to demonstrate that they can do so much more to make them stand out from the crowd. I sometimes do a talk for students at one of the universities in Bristol, and you know, they always ask, you know, how do I get a job in magazine publishing? I said, well, look, for every job that we advertise, we'll get hundreds of applicants. So what can you do that will make you stand out? There was a great example once of someone on Country File magazine, which we publish, where somebody sent in their CV written on the side of a Wellington boot. And I thought that was a brilliant way of making yourself stand out. That CV got read. I've no idea whether they got the job or not, but I do remember giving that talk and seeing loads of people write down Wellington boot. And it's not the Wellington, the Wellington boot isn't the thing that'll make you stand out, but what can you do? I always used to just use a slightly different colored paper for, when we used to send in things on paper, because you see, anything slightly different will catch an employer's eye. So I think it's very hard for young people, because they got to have so many things that are going to make them stand out from the crowd now.
Yeah,
I don't want to be one of those fellas.
Yeah, I know that Maya, she's going to ask a couple of questions about that, being a young person herself and also wanting to get into that world, I suppose. So she'll be asking you questions. But let me ask, BBC Wildlife Magazine, very revered in the world of natural history publishing. To be in this magazine, it's like, you've made it. It's a holy grail. I've actually been published. But the thing is, you say 14 to 15, different pictures a day you get. You must on the way into work climb over people in sleeping bags waiting outside your office with pictures. What catches your eye with a pitch? And have you ever had an elevator pitch? Have you ever had someone jump in a lift literally with you and say, look, I've got 20 seconds, here's my pitch? Have you had that sort of stuff as well, or is it more mundane?
I have occasionally had that, but that will then tend to be like a colleague from another magazine within the building. So, we publish from our Bristol office, we publish, I think, something like 30, 40 magazines. We've got a London office too. I think we've got a Manchester office, but I've no idea what happens there. So the London office is, does another, whole mountain of magazines. So you tend to get to know each other over the years. So I've had that. And I've done that. I've got in the lift with the editor of another magazine saying, oh, funny, I bumped into you. I had this really interesting idea for a feature about such and such. And I spoke to so-and-so. So it does happen, but I mean, only really if you're in the building. If someone's in the building and they don't work there, then something's gone wrong with security. What catches my eye? That's easy, a story. Everything for me is a story. And I believe that everybody loves stories. I love stories. I'm sure you love stories. And if you can tell someone a story, that's a wonderful gift. And, you go back right through human history. The person who could tell the story would be the one that everybody listened to, at the end of the day, around the fire in the village, and telling stories is a magic thing to be able to do for a living. And so that's what I'm always looking for. The story, we get a lot of pictures saying, here's this latest piece of research, and I could speak to this professor and that expert and this person in the field, and I'm looking at it going, yeah, but where's the story there? So the story can just be, it can begin, I was doing a dive, and just out of the corner of my eye, I saw the water spraying up, and it landed and it soaked me, and I was in the shower. And that's you're kicking off, and you're then talking about some experience with a whale, and then you then talk about the science, and then you bring in the expert, and you bring in the people who are doing the conservation or whatever they're doing. But you've got me hooked because you're telling me a story about when you were diving. You wrote a feature for us recently, David, about Antarctica, and you began with, you were on the boat, and that's that's the story. I'm really into Agatha Christie at the moment. I used to read them when I was a teenager, and I got them recently. And you start off in Agatha Christie, but I don't know if you ever read Agatha Christie. But you just start off and you're on a boat, and oh, brilliant, right, what happened and who's there and who are the people, and you just get taken along. So it's the same no matter what you're doing, and that works right across. I've never worked on a subject matter that isn't true for.
So it's all about a beginning, middle, and end in terms of a rounded story.
Yeah, and you can educate me on the way. You can give me the information on the way. You can educate me, but I want to be entertained. I used to have a boss who said that he said that what you're doing with specialist magazines is three E's. You're doing entertainment, you're educating, and you're enthusing. And I think that he was largely right. That is the job. But the first of those is entertaining. You're never gonna read the whole thing if it's dull and flat and boring and it's just a series of facts. After a while, you switch off. Your brain can only absorb so many facts. Your brain can listen to stories all day.
Okay, that's writing. But one of the big things about BBC Wildlife magazine is the photography. And
Yeah.
as you know, every person and their dog has a camera now. And I know people who have been murdered to get a picture a picture published in BBC Wildlife magazine. It feels, or it felt in the past, as if it was a little bit of a club, in that if you were in with the editor, then your photos would be used again and again.
Right.
But I had photographers saying to me, "How do I break into this? How do I get into BBC Wildlife? It's the holy grail. How do I get into it?" So what do you look for in photography, and how can a photographer turn your head?
What do we look for? We look for something that makes us go, look at that. Wow. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're after on every page. That's not all we're after. We're looking for something that shows new technique or something that illustrates new behavior. So we'll take a not very good quality photo of something extraordinary. We will only take an extraordinary photo of something ordinary. So it's kind of really difficult to define. There's something about a picture that I just look at and I just think, yeah, that is just absolutely amazing. If I was good with words, I'd be able to explain it. In terms of how do you get your picture in the magazine, we've got a really good thing that we do on social media, where we have a daily competition, basically, the photo of the day. We've got, I think, somewhere in the region of 600,000 followers on our various social media across Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and so on. And we get so many brilliant pictures sent in to us for that competition. And every day there's a winner. So every day someone's image gets shared to that large audience. And I mean, those are not, top level wildlife photographers. Those are amateurs. Those are people who just, are trying to develop and try and get better. So that's a great way to attract our attention, because we all look at that. Tom, who's our picture editor, he looks at that every day. He's like, "Oh, that's interesting. I'm really keen on that. I wonder if they've got any more." And then he might contact them and say, do you have a set? So that's a really good way of getting in. But yeah, I mean, we get similar sort of numbers of photographers email us every day. And a lot of the times the photographs are not that exciting, much better than I could take, but that's not saying an awful lot. But then we'll get one, every day there'll be one that we'll look at and go, "Wow, look at that, that's really cool. God, I've never seen one of those before. What's," and we'll sort of share it and look at it in the office. But, there is only so much space within the magazine that we can fill. In terms of how you end up, having your photos featured, I guess you have a really, really good set of photos that give a wide variety. So, got this brilliant set of photos the other day of an antelope, and every one of them were brilliant, but they were all the same color, which is tricky because antelopes are the same color and their habitat is the same color, but you can't fill 6, 7, 8 pages with sort of dusty brown. You have to have something different within the set to to break it up because otherwise it just becomes beige. So you're thinking about, how can I give variety? How can I show lots of things that are different? We're also, I mean, one thing that the best way that you can pitch to us a feature, right, is to say, here's the story and here's the pictures. We got pitched this amazing sounding feature about this, this insect that lives in one tiny little area and no one's seen it for the last 8 years, but we know it's there. It's like, well, that's a great story, but there's no way we're putting that in the magazine because we haven't got any pictures of it. Similarly, if you send us loads and loads of wonderful photos of macrobiotic life forms that live in the Pacific, if there's no connection, if there's no story that goes through them, we might pick one, but we're not going to put a photo set. If you work together with a journalist, if you're a photographer and you work with a journalist, or you're a journalist and you work with a photographer, and you work together on the story and on the pitch, and you can say, okay, so here's the story, I'm the journalist, here's the story, here's the photographer, there's the pics. It makes our life easy, and who doesn't want their life to be made easy,
Yeah, it's interesting because I was a judge on the Wildlife Photographer of the Year award. Very fortunate and privileged to be that. And a lot of the imagery, of course, was superb. But I also felt that some people didn't understand what a story was photographically. Because you need to look at a series of photographs and even without the words, work out what this storyline is. So I think, as you say, I can identify with that. I think that some people don't actually understand. I think it's just a bunch of nice photographs and that'll do. You can kind of work around it. But in reality, the stories, the photographs have got to tell a story as well, haven't they?
They have, and quite often that can be with sort of, putting some people in there. That can really help. You look at, there's a lot of nice features that we do that look at, the relationship between a local community. There was one on bats in Madagascar, and it was, the bats had always been seen as, these devils, and now they're, the story was sort of how the image of the bats in Madagascar has changed, and how the culturally the way that people look at bats there has changed, and how they're now embracing them. So you can include the people within that, and that's a great way to get us, people are a great way to link elements of a story, because most of these stories that most of the stories that we report on, well, not most, but a lot of them do include people, conservationists, people, conflict with living near animals, farming, all those sorts of things.
Okay. The question I wanted to ask really was to do with the content, and obviously it's called BBC Wildlife Magazine. How much of that is actually dictated by the fact that the BBC are doing something? Do you have to sort of feature people or the animals or the shows themselves as part of the editorial?
Yes and no. We have to support, and it's part of the reason that we exist, is to support what the BBC historically, what the BBC Natural History Unit has been producing. Now the landscape has changed in recent years, so the Natural History Unit, as was, is now part of BBC Studios, which is what used to be BBC Worldwide, which, without getting too bogged down into boring details, is the commercial arm of the BBC, whose job it is to generate revenue to support the BBC. It's not just a license fee. So anytime that you buy a DVD of the latest David Attenborough series, you're buying that from BBC Studios, and the profits are put back into making more natural history programming. Is the basic idea of it. So we want to support what programs are going out on the BBC, but also BBC Studios now makes programs for Netflix, and Sky make programs for the BBC, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of got a little bit muddier, but we do, we are BBC Wildlife. We're not just wildlife, and so it's important that we, when Spring Watch is on, that we, get Gillian to write us a piece, or talk to Chris about what he's up to, and those sorts of things. And of course, we're not just a magazine, we've got a website and social media, and so we support the those sorts of programs through that. But it's not a case of you have to put a feature in the magazine around this program. It's sort of left up to our editorial judgment.
And often magazines obviously have facelifts, and I know from the past with other magazines that sometimes people are throwing rocks at you saying, why did you change it? What's wrong with it? Why do you change, i.e. the magazine? Why do you change your image every now and again? And what drives that?
Well, I mean, we're doing that at the moment. Actually, we're looking at a bit of a little bit of a reshuffle of the content that goes in. The main reason that we change is that the audience changes. Now, we've not done a major redesign on BBC Wildlife in, I don't know, 15 years or so, something like that. And in that time, 15 years ago, we didn't have these things. We didn't have, this thing that we're talking on. We didn't have webinars and these sorts of things. You got all of your information really from magazines. Magazines were huge, and then about 15 years ago, they just kind of went vroom. Not all of them, but a lot of magazines, just disappeared. We used to publish, for example, at our company, we used to have 3 or 4 magazines full of hairstyles. We had Your Hair, Hair Ideas, blonde hair, and people would buy those magazines if they were thinking of changing their hairstyle. What you would do is you would go to the newsagent and you would buy a couple of magazines with pictures, and you would just sit and flip through, tear out the ones you'd like, and go to your hairdresser and say, this is what I'd like. And then when the internet sort of developed to a certain stage, it was almost as though last month we sold, hundreds of thousands of copies, and then next month we just didn't sell any, because all of a sudden, if you want to change your haircut, you go online and you change it. So the audience changes, and we have to reflect that. BBC Wildlife magazine launched in 1963, believe it or not. It was called Animals, and then it became Wildlife, and then BBC Wildlife in 1982, 83, something like that. And we've got copies of every issue in our office. I was looking at some the other day. It's amazing. I fished out a copy from, I think, 1986. And in there, it's very much a journal. Here's every single book being published on wildlife this month. And it's pages of this kind of stuff, because where else would you get that information? Whereas now, you kind of want, okay, I'm going to turn to the books page. I just kind of want to know what the really interesting books, what are the people at BBC Wildlife and the various authors they know, what are they reading, what are they looking forward to, what's out, and then you can go and you can go online and find out a bit more and decide to buy it. But it's far less, it's far less of a sort of an essential periodical, so much as a way of luxuriating in your specialist interest. So when you get your BBC Wildlife magazine now, it's escapist. This is a treat for me. I'm going to sit with a cup of tea or coffee in my favorite place. I'm going to look, I'm going to read it, I'm going to enjoy it, I'm going to, roll it up and stick it in my back pocket and read it on the bus, or I'm going to take it with me when I go for a picnic. It's that kind of thing. Whereas it used to be, I need to find out the news. So I get open, here's the latest, the roundup from the science journals. But is that what people want from a magazine, a roundup of science journals? Because you get it on Twitter, you get it on, you get it on our website, you get it on our Twitter. Do you need to wait for the magazine? So those are the kind of conversations that we're having. But fundamentally, it needs to be changed for reasons of how we consume how we consume content has changed. And, I think probably one of the greatest things that BBC Wildlife magazine can do that nowhere else can get is those wonderful, DPS double page spread images that of some of the best photography in the world. There's nowhere else that you're going to get that. You can see a small version of it on your phone or a slightly bigger version of your screen. But you're not going to just turn the page and see that kind of thing. This kind of thing, it's absolutely glorious. And you can go into, great detail within a feature. We've got a piece like this, again, wonderful photography, great opener. But then you've got pages and pages of brilliant photography and great writing, which is such a lovely medium to, you hold it in your hand, it's bendy, you can stick it in your back pocket if you like, take it anywhere. Your experience reading on a screen is very different. You want the information quickly. You don't want to luxuriate in it. You just want to find out and move on. So we have to respond to changes in, consumption of media. But there are also things as simple as you run out of ideas of what to do with something. You might have a regular column or a regular spot where you talk about, every issue we'll take a look at a different one of these. And eventually you kind of run out, you've done 40 or 50 of them and you think, actually, we're starting to scrape the barrel a bit here. So we need to freshen that up. And that happens, right across the board. And the other reason is that things gradually change naturally. Things evolve naturally. Because we're doing a bit of a redevelopment work at the moment, we're sitting there talking amongst us as a team, and there are certain bits in the magazine that we looked at and we said, do you know what, I don't really like this page very much, or I don't really like this little box that we do here very much. Why do we do it? And someone else will say, God, I'm glad you said that, because I don't like it either. And then we'll sort of say, well, why do we do it then? Who can remember why we started? And it'll probably have evolved. It started out as being like this, but that didn't quite work, and it gradually morphed into this. And we think, so we're all doing this little thing that none of us like, that's really hard work. So you think, well, okay, things have got to change. What we're doing at the moment is we're sort of doing a review of that right across the board. It's very important that you don't lose the things that make people buy the magazine in the first place. And chances are we'll get a couple of bits wrong, and readers will write in and very quickly and tell us very passionately that we've got it wrong, and which can be a bit hurtful sometimes. You think, oh, I tried really hard with that and then they will hate me. But you have to remember that the reason that people are passionate about it is because they are passionate about it. They buy the magazine because they're passionate about wildlife. And it's their magazine. I'm just the curator. It's not my magazine. I've heard people, editors in the past have heard them say, oh, it's my magazine. This isn't my magazine. I'm lucky enough to be the 6th editor in its 60-year history, something like that. And I feel very, very privileged, but I'm just curating it. So we'll do our best to get it right. If we get bits you don't do, things you don't like, just let us know, and we can fix them. But it's important that we do it all at once, because what you can't do is just sort of, okay, well, we're going to change that bit because that didn't work, and then we're going to change that bit, and then a couple of months later we'll change that bit. It makes readers feel uncomfortable. It's like, it's like going to the supermarket and every time you go in they've put the cheese in a different area. You're like, it just gets annoying. You can take it that you go in once and the cheese isn't where it used to be. You find the cheese, and then from there on you know where the cheese is. So it's it's a bit of a fine balance, but yeah, I hate it when people change magazines. All the ones I buy, when they do a redesign, oh, you've ruined it. 3 issues in, if they were to change it, I go, no, don't change that. That's great.
Briefly, what is your favorite animal? Your favorite mammal?
So I have always said, in answer to that question, the polar bear. But recently, I keep looking at tigers, and just I'm finding my eyes starting to wander a little bit, David. I still love polar bears. Don't get me wrong, but I'm starting to wonder if maybe maybe there's something in this thing for the tiger.
What is it
I,
about the tiger?
What is it about tiger? They're just immense. They're absolutely, everything about them is immense, isn't it? The look on their faces, the broadness of their faces, the size of their paws, you know, the strength, the power with them. What a great outfit. I mean, how cool is that for an outfit, you know? All those brilliant stripes. They just change from orange to white to black. Or they are so adaptable. You know, they can live in so many different climates, can't they? And different, you know, we're talking at the moment about a feature, I can't remember if we've just run it or about to run, about tigers are now living at greater and greater altitudes in and around, pretty sure it was Nepal, that they're finding that the tigers are adapting, you know, so they live halfway up the Himalayas, and they live, you know, on the delta, and they live in the jungle, and they, you know, I mean, they can eat anything. I mean, they're great, aren't they, really, tigers?
Can't mess with a tiger.
I wouldn't advise it. My grandfather encountered one during the war, actually. He didn't mess with him, he legged it.
You got lucky. If you could be anywhere in the world, Paul, notwithstanding the current pandemic, where would you be right now?
I think probably, I can't decide between somewhere I've been before that I'd love to be right now, or somewhere I've never been. I'm going to say somewhere I've never been, Costa Rica. I would just love to be in the forest in the jungle of Costa Rica. I love rainforest is my favorite environment, followed closely by the coast. And so Costa Rica is brilliant for that, isn't it?
Yeah. Not
And
bad.
I've never seen a toucan, and I'd love to see a toucan.
Well, that's a good place to start, definitely. Costa Rica is actually great. Sorry?
Maybe you could take me, David. We can pop over there, and you can find me a toucan.
I'll hold you to that, definitely. That's actually, Costa Rica is one of the most popular answers over the last year for where I'd like to be, notwithstanding the actual pandemic. So good choice. Zoomers, just to let you know that the final in conservation with of the series is on Monday, the 28th of June at 7 p.m. BST, and it's with a guy called Joe Shute. I'm sure you know him, Paul. I know of him. He's a journalist. He's written a book called "What Do You Know About the Weather?" and that's what he's going to be talking about. So we'll be talking then. Paul, it's been a pleasure and really fascinating to learn about, you know, one of the most revered, as I said earlier, one of the most revered magazines in the natural history world of publishing, and has been for probably from the year dot. Thank you for sparing your time this evening to talk to us. Really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I'm sorry I had to make you chase me so hard, but it's been quite a year.
Yeah, but I just find myself chasing men these days. I don't know whether it's climate change or I don't know what's going on. But Zoomers, thank you very much again for supporting tonight, but also supporting the last couple of series. I mean, started this in April 2020, and it's been really, you know, people love it. So thank you very much for supporting it. Thank you for coming tonight. Wish you all the best, and take care of yourselves, and have a great weekend and all that sort of stuff. And hopefully see you on Monday for the final one. But until then, you know what to do. Keep looking up.